I will admit the press right now. And Eric, let us know when we're ready to go. Excellent. A note to the press, if you can keep your microphones muted when you're not talking, that will help with echo, and we'll have time for questions at the end, and I'll hand it over to the commissioner.
Great, thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Grove here, the Commissioner of the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and welcome to our first ever virtual broadband press conference. We figured why not lean into the technology we're trying to promote with this program by doing a video live stream to talk about the latest award winners for these border broadband grants and hear from some of those grantees to understand just how important this issue is in our economy. I'm joined today by the Director of our Office for Broadband Development at DEED, Angie Dickinson. Say hey, Angie. We have Bill Eccles from BevCom as well, Bill Jensen from MediaCom, and Tim Brinkman from Garden Valley. Welcome, gentlemen. Thrilled to have you here to share your stories in just a minute. And I'll just offer a couple of thoughts up top and then turn it over to Angie for some of the details on these awards. It seems sort of almost like the obvious statement of the year to talk about how important broadband is. We all have seen that during this pandemic. And one of the things we're very fortunate for in Minnesota is we have one of the best broadband programs in the entire state. Some of my predecessors and previous governors have really laid a groundwork for this and created, with legislators, a really fantastic program that helps incentivize broadband providers in our state to go places they might otherwise go with this technology to make sure that the entire state can get connected. And we've set some really ambitious goals in this space. We want to be in a place where by 2022, 100% of the state has at least 25 megabit speed download and 3 megabit speed upload. And really the big goal, and the one that I think is much more in line with sort of modern commercial and personal broadband needs, is 100 megabits down and 25 megabits up by 2026. And so our grant program, which uses Minnesota taxpayer dollars to get these lines into communities where they're needed, has given out millions of dollars of grants over the years. And today we're announcing an additional $20 million in grants that will inspire 39 projects across the state. They'll be matched by over 33 million additional private sector dollars and local funds that will end up totaling $45 million in broadband investments. So this is a very much a partnership of the public and the private sector to get this done. And it's as vital as ever. We all know this. Again, just to be Captain Obvious here, we've got a situation in which kids need to learn from home. People are working from home like me in my basement right here in Minneapolis. We got schools that need broadband connections. All of these things are priorities as we evaluate the applications that come in. And as Angie will tell you in a minute, we had a lot of really great applications. This was a tough round to decide through. The demand for this program is huge. And I'll just say lastly, before turning it over to Angie to walk through some of the details of the grantees, we are by no means done with this journey. We are still at a space in our state where 87% of homes and businesses do not meet that speed standard that I mentioned a moment ago of 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up. And that's not acceptable. This is not something that's sort of a luxury to have in your home. This is how we stay connected to the world these days. And so we've got more work to do. And so Governor Walz announced on Tuesday, as you may have seen, an additional $50 million proposal to expand and accelerate this grant program and put even more homes and businesses and hospitals and schools in connection with high-speed internet across Minnesota. So it's been a major priority of his budgets throughout his time as governor, and this year is no different. We're eager to work with the legislature on that. We know that this is not really a partisan issue. It's just an issue of priorities. And so very eager to see that investment made, and we'll be fighting for that along with advocates across the state. With that, I'll turn it over to Angie to walk through some of the details of the announcements, and thanks again for joining us. Angie, over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Happy to introduce some of our grant recipients today, and grateful to be here with you all to talk about our grant program. We had many great applications submitted for this grant round. DEED received requests for $42 million in funding for 64 different applications during our latest grant round. The projects we are announcing today will bring high quality broadband access to underserved and unserved areas of Minnesota, providing fast, reliable internet access for over 6,900 businesses and homes. 3 of our grant recipients are joining us today, and I'm happy that they are here to share a bit more detail with you about their upcoming projects. BevCom was awarded 2 grants this time around, with a $1.1 million grant for a project in rural Faribault and Martin counties, and a $210,000 grant for a project in rural Morristown. Now I'm happy to turn it over to Bill Eccles, BevCom's CEO. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Angie. Before I jump into the grants, Angie, I just need to say thank you to yourself and your team at the Office of Broadband Development. We know it's a challenge trying to bring broadband out into the rural parts of Minnesota, trying to bring fiber out there, and you folks have been definitely a partner with us on trying to do that and trying to come through this challenge. The 2 grants we got in total, as I said, the total project between the 2 will be $3.5 million, with the grants covering roughly 40% of it. This is going to bring fiber optics, dedicated fiber optics, to 540 locations where we're going to be able to offer gigabit speeds. We'll begin construction on that this spring as soon as the snow melts and the ground opens up for us. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that BevCom does when we look into these areas is we go and we canvass the people that live in them, and we ask them to provide us their stories about why they need to have broadband, what's missing, the challenges they have. And the letters we get, it's just astounding, the need out there. And so with that, I mean, I just want to say thank you for the 2 awards, and I'm sure our customers are going to be extremely happy in a year from now. So thanks. Bill?
Thank you for that, Bill. Now we'll go over to MediaCom. MediaCom Minnesota was awarded 2 grants, a $624,000 grant for a project in Hermantown, and a $189,000 grant for a project in Minnetrista. Now I'll turn it over to Bill Jensen, MediaCom's Group Vice President. Bill?
Thank you, Angie, and Commissioner Grove. What a great opportunity for all of us to not just talk about broadband, but share some success stories. And I can tell you that this broadband grant program here in Minnesota is truly a success story. And I know I don't work for the folks at DEED, but I have a little bit of history here. I go back to the 2014 application year. So in 2015, we were one of the first companies in Minnesota to receive a broadband grant. Back then, that was for 8 miles up on the Iron Range. And we provided broadband service to over 130 homes and businesses up there that were truly not just underserved, but unserved. And here we are now, fast forward, and we've been successful at MediaCom receiving a number of grants over the years. Just a quick thing about MediaCom. MediaCom is in 22 states throughout the country. I'm based here in MediaCom in Minnesota, and in Minnesota we provide broadband service to 187 communities. And in a lot of those communities, we call them outstate, outside of the Twin Cities metro area. And as you go further out, sometimes those housing densities, obviously in the rural parts of the state, tend to thin out. And when we talk about expanding services, especially broadband plant and building it, whether we're undergrounding or we're attaching to existing utility poles, it's important that that there are people out there, enough homes to justify the investment. And what I think the real key point to this broadband grant program is that when in rural Minnesota, where there just don't seem to be sometimes the densities to justify the build outs, with the state of Minnesota and DEED stepping up to provide grant dollars to offset some of those costs, it allows us to extend where maybe normally, and I'm only speaking for MediaCom, where we wouldn't or we couldn't, it's just not cost effective. So kudos to a great program. I know for a fact because I operate systems in Wisconsin and in the state of Iowa. I know both of those states, and Angie, you've got a history with Wisconsin as well. But both of those states really picked up a lot of the high points from what's been going on in Minnesota since back in the fall of 2014. So we're really excited. I think what's most important here, and I know all of us as grant recipients for the Broadband Grant Program understand the responsibilities that we have, especially when we're receiving state taxpayer dollars. We don't take it lightly. We know that that there's a partnership, and the partnership isn't just with the state of Minnesota, and not just with the customers that we're going to extend broadband to, but also to those communities that might keep the residents there if they have better broadband, or if they have none, they're unserved, they'll finally get broadband. Number two, make that community perhaps a destination for new businesses to help those communities continue to grow. So just a quick couple of other points. And again, it's all about partnerships and responsibility, and we don't take it lightly. We will be, for this year in 2021, the two grants, which Angie touched on. One is up on the Iron Range, just outside of Duluth. And, you know, we think about Duluth, it's a metropolitan area. When you start getting outside of Duluth into the Hermantown area, St. Louis County, the housing densities just aren't there to justify building it on our own. So we're going to be building in an area that a farmer who's a baseball fan started a development, and it's called the Field of Dreams. And he built a little baseball field, and now the development is called Field of Dreams. So that's exciting. That's over 17 miles of fiber to the home broadband plant we'll be building there. And then here we go again, thinking of the cities. I talked about being outstate, but now I want to come back to the metro area, the Twin Cities area. You wouldn't think this, but even not too far off of the Lake Minnetonka area, the city of Minnetrista. A great city like all of the cities in Minnesota, but there's some very rural, lower populated, less dense housing areas. And we'll be building out a little over 5.5 miles in the city of Minnetrista to those homes and businesses, by the way, that are either underserved or unserved. So, and we're working with both communities, and whether those communities partner with us to help fund some of the project, or partner with us to help us expedite permitting, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is really bringing a lot of actions and groups to the table. So again, we're really excited. We're honored. We appreciate the responsibility that the state of Minnesota and DEED and the taxpayers have put in us, and we'll deliver.
Thank you for that, Bill. Our next grant recipient is Garden Valley Technologies. Garden Valley received a $1.6 million grant for a project in portions of Marshall and Polk counties. Now I'm happy to turn it over to Tim Brinkman, Garden Valley Technologies CEO. Tim?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Angie, for including me in today's conversation. I think it's really an important one. I'd like to echo the previous speakers in thanking DEED and the Office of Broadband. You really do a bang-up job, and we really do appreciate it. As mentioned, my name is Tim Brinkman. I'm the CEO and General Manager for Garden Valley Technologies, headquartered here in Erskine, Minnesota. Garden Valley is a cooperative that was founded in 1906, and we've been deploying and providing broadband services for over 25 years in northern Minnesota. And Garden Valley does have a very large service area, covering approximately 3,800 square miles. And we currently do have fiber to the home available to 90% of our service area, and will be 100% within the next 2 years. And this will be Garden Valley's third broadband grant through the Border to Border Grant Program. Our grant application this year is for the Euclid and Northwest Thief River Falls area, and covers 126 locations, of which 92 are residents, 8 businesses, and 22 farms, along with 4 community institutions. And I'd like to thank the office again, because without this grant, the project just quite simply would be too cost prohibitive. This is due to the very large rural environment that we're operating in, and it covers approximately 95 square miles with only 1.3 locations per square mile. So as Mr. Jensen mentioned, I think that qualifies as a little spread out, maybe a little bit more than what he was mentioning. But at 1.3 locations per square mile, it's tough to build that out. And without grant programs like this, it would be nearly impossible. But those farmers, I mentioned there's 22 farms in that area. Broadband in today's day and age, as you know, is vital. And without this program, they really are struggling out there. One quick story I'd like to share comes from our previous broadband grant in the Beijing area, which had a similar type of density. But the very first customer that we were able to get hooked up after building out the grant process was a customer that was 92 years old, a resident that lived alone. And conveniently, the second customer that we hooked up was her granddaughter that looked after her. So this 92-year-old resident had not had working phone service or service at all for a number of weeks prior to us installing her services. And obviously, this is very important to her for her family to have working services, as that was the only communications that she had. The second install, like I mentioned, was her granddaughter at her residence, which consisted of broadband services. And they were very excited to get installed with Garden Valley's broadband because they were planning on using it actually for downloading books onto her grandmother's Kindle, which she enjoys reading. And without that, she, again, living alone at 92, that was a very vital piece for her, which she couldn't do before. And additionally, the granddaughter was very anxious to have the much needed internet service for her small business, which she ran out of her home, and its daily tasks, which are helping her grow her business. So the family is very, very thankful, something they weren't able to really do before conveniently. And without these services and without DEED and the Office of Broadband and this grant program, it really wouldn't have been available to them. So thank you again. Once again, thank DEED and the Office of Broadband, the governor, and the state of Minnesota for the opportunity to continue providing these services to those unserved areas across the state, and happy to serve those 1.3 locations per square mile as best as we can. So again, thank you for including me today, and we look forward to continuing this project.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim. Appreciate those stories, and let's go to questions. I see, Walker, you have your hand up.
Hi, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, no problem. One question I had was, I know that there had been some question of whether the state should offer grants for projects in areas where companies that got RDOF awards would serve. I know that there's been some controversy over the company LTD Broadband. Even the state's own broadband task force questioned whether they could pull off some of those projects. Can you just talk about, did you decide to award grants for projects in those zones or not, and why?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Walker, and you've reported on this for some time. I think, or at least since December when those federal awards came out. So what we did when those awards came out is we went back to any applicant who applied to the state program and said, okay, now that we see the geographies that these programs are in, if you would like to shift or change or adapt any of your application materials given those awards, you have a window to do that. And that was important because, of course, you never want to spend a state dollar where a federal one can do the job. We did get a lot of revised applications based on that chance to resubmit, and made the decision when looking at the award, the applications that came in, not to award anybody that was, or any project that was in a parcel of land that would already have been covered by the federal grants that came in, the RDOF grants. We're aware of the task force concerns, or at least questions regarding some of the money that did come to Minnesota. We're quite happy that that much money did come into the state via the federal program. We're going to continue to evaluate that and work with the partners who receive those grants. We're in a quiet period for that right now, so that's something that will happen sort of in the future. But we did want to make sure that none of the taxpayer dollars we put into the our program are going to be duplicative, and it's something we'll continue to monitor. This is obviously a hot time for broadband, right? I mean, you saw some of those awards that came in through the latest federal aid package. A lot of money in there for subsidies, a lot of money in there for tribal lands and other auctions. You know, depending on what happens with this $1.9 billion or $1 trillion proposal from President Biden, there could be more. But we think it's important for the state to continue to be aggressive here. And the state program is usually a lot faster than the federal program, which is important for people to understand. We have a much tighter time window within which people have to get these lines in. So there are some differences too, but we'll continue to monitor it.
Thanks,
And
Commissioner.
just a quick follow-up, would it have been untenable to wait for sort of the long form finalized approval from the feds on those RDOF grants? Like, could you have waited? How long would that have taken? Or was it just you guys had to move quicker than that?
I'll let Angie answer this too a bit. I'd just say we generally try to move quickly because as soon as that ground thaws, we want to get companies up and moving, and some of the contracting takes time. But Angie, do you want to speak to the federal timeline if there's any more to share there?
Thank you, Commissioner, and a good question, Walker. But yes, our intent was to get these grant funds awarded so that construction could begin quickly, and it takes us a bit of time to get these awards finalized. And we want to give the gentleman you see here and the other grant recipients plenty of time to get started so that folks can start receiving broadband service as quickly as possible.
Say, Angie, it's Bill, just to dovetail off of that, and I think, Walker, for you, anybody that's participated in this broadband grant program, it's not like the state is giving us the money up front. Believe it or not, there's a rigorous accounting rules and practices and forms, I might add, that we have to submit. So this is kind of, I don't want to say pay as you go, but you break it into parts, and as you complete various parts of the project, and in some cases you can do it all in one submission, that's when you submit for reimbursement. And actually, the broadband folks send inspectors out to verify, A, that it's been built, B, it's been built to code, and C, that we're delivering the broadband speeds at an absolute minimum that are required for the funding.
Yeah, no,
and then you get paid. And then you get paid. Okay.
No, it's a great point. I'm glad you added that. It is a process. We appreciate the partnership on it. Let's go to Matthew Ledke at the Bemidji Pioneer.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit about the goals that have been set. Reading through some past press releases, there have been goals set about 2022 and 2026 as being benchmarks, I guess, for having some of these goals completed by. Is this still on track, would you say, for those goals to be met to get to 2022 and 2026? And after that, I'm curious about what kind of the next phases will be as we go toward 2030 in terms of just trying to keep up with technology.
Yeah, it's a good question, Matthew. You'll see in the task force's report, their assessment of reaching our 2022 goal is that we would need 120 million over the biennium. So, you know, there is more money to be spent here, and I think we're eager to engage with the legislature on what's possible, knowing federal money may come too. So we've made really good progress. I don't know if we're quite at the clip yet where we're going to meet that goal unless we do more. So we've got to be aggressive here, and I think that'll be a big part of the conversation at the legislature. I will say this, just as a clarifying point, any line we lay, any line that a partner lays has to be able to have the capacity of taking in 100 down, 20 up, and many of them are to I think it was Tim's point at gig speed capacity from the start. So we're not out there laying 25-3 lines, if you will. We are laying the fast stuff right away. Should we go to Jared Dean?
Yeah, hi, Jared Dean. I'm with KYC out here in Mankato. Yeah, I had a question for Bill Eccles. You mentioned with your grant you were moving into 540 new locations and you got fiber optics everywhere. What are some of your more target areas that maybe weren't reached before?
Okay, so what do you mean by target areas?
Like your newer areas that maybe people were not getting reached before that they are now getting coverage.
Yeah, so it's the areas we're going. I mean, it's parts of Rice, Waseca, Steele County, Faribault County, Martin County. These are areas that today, either there's no service or the service is very, very poor. And so it's, as Tim said, it's rural, spread out areas that would be too expensive for us to try and build on our own. And so that's the point of the grant, is to get this fiber optic out to it, and the grant helps make it feasible. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And then what percentage of your service area would you say that you are covering?
With the grant?
Yeah, well, just in general, I know, Tim mentioned earlier his coverage area, so.
Yeah, so we pass 22,000 homes. Roughly 50% of our subscribers right now are on a dedicated fiber optic network. So, we're adding another 540 with these two projects. And then we have a whole host of other projects coming this summer, adding additional areas. Our goal over the next, 7-8 years is to get to 100% fiber optic.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go back to Walker.
Hey, thanks for taking another one. I just wanted to ask more specifically, the task force you mentioned did say that 120 million was their recommendation. I think the governor's budget only had 50 million. I know there has been at least one proposal. Senator Bach, Representative Eklund proposed 120 million. Is that a reflection? Do you think 120 million is just too much at this point? And how come?
Well, I don't think it's too much in the grand scheme of things, certainly. But given the number of competing priorities and where we're at with the budget, that was, a robust number, a robust starting place that we felt good about with 50. But we're looking forward to working with Senator Bach, Representative Eklund, and others on where we land here. And there's a lot of energy around this issue. Budgets are a starting place for the conversation, but the governor is really committed to this. He was a longtime broadband advocate as a congressman, and as a governor has made this a big priority. So we're eager to discuss more and see what's available. And of course, that February forecast could change things. Who knows where that number will be in just a month? So more to come.
Thanks. As we approach time here, we have time for one more question. Okay, looks like we're good. Thanks so much for joining, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Tim and Bill. Thanks for sharing your stories, and we're eager to get this money out as quickly as we can, and excited to connect Minnesota. This is a really important priority for our state. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.